Now, what could Radek Sikorski mean, the member of parliament representing Poland, a deeply Russophobic country? What could he mean when he says, "Thank you, USA," and posts a picture of the Nord Stream pipeline exploding? Anyone know what he might be implying here? Let's break it down. So, an expeditionary detachment of U.S. Navy ships led by the Universal Amphibious Assault Ship, the USS Kearsarge, days ago was in the Baltic Sea. What could they have been doing in the Baltic Sea? Said Ursula von der Leyen and Olaf Scholz. And they were warning Der Spiegel about the attack on Nord Stream 1 and 2. What was they doing in the Baltic Sea? Surely not violating Article 5 of the NATO treaty. So, the USS Kearsarge was not only in the Baltic Sea, it was about 30 kilometers from the site of the alleged sabotage on the Nord Stream 1 gas pipeline, and only 50 kilometers from the threads of Nord Stream 2 gas pipelines. Oh my goodness. Well, I'll be damned. Today, there was some earth-shattering news surrounding Russian pipelines, the Nord Stream 1 and the Nord Stream 2 pipelines exploding. Now, I initially thought, everyone had these crazy takes. Everyone's like, was it Russia? Was it Ukraine? Was it the United States? Who could it have been? Well, my initial thought was this right here. I don't know what you guys were thinking, but this is where my brain initially went. I was wrong with my initial estimate, but I saw this headline and I'm like, no way. It was Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson was on his vacation after serving as PM, and he did a skydive belly flop from the top floor of his 5-story yacht, and it caused a mass explosion of the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines through his belly flop. I was wrong about that, but that's neither here nor there, because we have more facts now, and we can actually decipher what really went on with these pipelines, okay? So I say we start off the story here, because of course, nothing happens in a vacuum, folks. Everything is interconnected. It's all connected. Hegel was right. Okay, so take a look at this. This was just a few days ago. Putin considering talks with Kiev, according to the Turkish FM. Saudis were also saying similar things. Saudis also potentially were going to be a mediator. The potential negotiations should take into account new conditions, the top diplomat said, citing the Russian president. Now, what would these new conditions be? Of course, they would be the referenda that just took place in Kherson, Zaporizhia, LPR, and the DPR. Those would be factored into the negotiations. Okay, so this was on the agenda. This was a serious thing. Russian President Vladimir Putin is considering resuming talks with Ukraine. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu said on Monday. The top diplomat made the remarks during a press conference in Tokyo, where he's attending the funeral of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who was assassinated in July. Dang, that's a very late funeral. Is that how they do it in Japan? According to Cavusoglu, Putin floated the idea during a conversation with his Turkish counterpart, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, at the recent summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in Samarkand, Uzbekistan. Okay, so of course these negotiations would take in new factors into account, and so this was on the agenda. This was a serious thing, all right, and it's important to recognize that before we get into what went on here. Because you have to understand that any sort of a potential negotiation of peace at this point in time would include negotiations surrounding turning on the spigots, getting those turbines back on for the Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2 pipelines, okay? If you don't believe me about that, take it from the one, the only Aaron Mate, who pointed this very fact out. In response to Europe's energy crisis, Putin said on September 17th that if Europe wants to solve the issue, it can ignore U.S. orders and open up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. That was on September 17th. That was not too long ago, okay? That was 10 days ago. So that would have been during this SCO, meeting where Putin was talking with Erdogan about reestablishing negotiations. So he said, if they want to solve this issue, they can ignore the orders and open up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Just push the button and everything will get going. Okay, so that was what Putin said. That was what Putin said. Does it really make sense that then Putin would go on to explode the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines? Does it? No. I mean, Putin, if he really wanted to bring Nord Stream 1 and 2 to a halt, complete, utter halt, what could he do? He doesn't have to destroy the infrastructure that, Russian businesses and investors put billions of dollars into, years of work into. He could just turn the spigot, turn the tap off. Lefty loosey, righty tighty, just turn it off, okay? You can do that from Russia. You can do that from, the comforts of Gazprom. You don't have to, and it's actually antithetical to the stated purpose of Putin's negotiations, as you see in this in the statement, to destroy the infrastructure, because the infrastructure, folks, can be used and would have been used as a tool for further negotiations. Okay. Instead, someone bombed it. All right. So this was Reuters 10 days ago. Putin tells Europe, if you want gas, then open Nord Stream 2. President Vladimir Putin on Friday denied Russia had anything to do with Europe's energy crisis, saying that if the European Union wanted more gas, it should lift the sanctions preventing the opening of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. The bottom line is, if you have an urge, if it's so hard for you, just lift the sanctions on Nord Stream 2, which is 55 billion cubic meters of gas per year. Just push the button and everything will get going, Putin said. Okay, so that didn't happen. Someone bombed Nord Stream 2. Someone did it. Who could have done such a thing? Who could have done such a thing? Well, my sources tell me it was not Boris Johnson belly flopping from the top of his yacht into the middle of the Baltic Sea. So this leads us to some very unsettling questions, okay? Could it have been Germany that did this? Well, Germany may have known about this. Germany may not have known about this. But it was almost entirely likely that it was not Germany. Germans already don't want Russian gas. They've already sanctioned themselves out of getting Russian gas. They've virtue signaling that they hate Russia, that they hate the Russian gas. Okay, whatever. Do they even possess the submarine technology needed to make something like this happen? I don't know. Okay. Ukraine, same questions rise to the surface. Do they have the technology? Do they have to manifest this? Do they have, they could just shut down all Ukraine pipelines. They've already shut down most of them, but they could shut down all Ukraine pipelines that flow Russian gas into Europe. We already know they've shut down most of them. Okay, so it's probably not them. Would it have been Russia? Okay, we already explained why it definitely was not Russia. There's no reason for it to have been Russia. 100,000%. Anyone who's saying this was Russia is covering up for who actually was likely the party responsible for committing this act of terror. And yes, that is what it was, an act of terror. Uncle Sam. The Americans. What? The Americans did this? The Americans committed a false flag attack to try and instigate a world war? When could they have ever done something like this in the past? It's not like they ever did this in the past. Oh boy. Okay, well, let me just, before we get into the details, because there are so many to dive into with regard to backing up the claim that it was probably America. Let me share a story with you that the one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend, Gonzalo Lira shared with his audience, myself included, today on his YouTube channel. He did a great breakdown of this very subject. Pretty much right when I woke up, I saw it. And I was like, 100%. This is so accurate, okay? To understand the motives behind why they would do this, okay? We're going to talk about the details that back up how they did this. And that they did this, but you have to understand why they did this. And it ties back to that story I just showed you about negotiations beginning. Olaf Scholz there was rumors that Olaf Scholz and some Ukrainian military officials and German military officials were going to be in talks with Russian military officials and high political personnel about negotiations. The Turks confirmed this. The Saudis were saying this. So what could be the motive of the United States here? Well, let's be quite honest. The United States, we know, and the UK want to continue this war in Ukraine for as long as possible. There's two reasons for that. A, they think that this is destabilizing Russia and hurting Russia. B, If Russia's not at war with Ukraine and the sanctions aren't continuing and Putin isn't, Putin isn't weaponizing energy anymore because hypothetically the war would be over, then who are civilians, who are the citizens in the United States, the UK, and the EU going to blame for the energy crises that are going to be hitting all of these countries in winter and the economic crises that are going to unfold subsequent to the energy crisis? They're not going to be able to blame Putin anymore if the war's over. They're going to blame their own governments. Protests will start in the streets. Destabilization will ensue in the West. Okay, so you understand this, right? Let me share a story with you that Gonzalo Lira shared on his video today, breaking this down. In 1519, Cortez arrived in the New World with 600 men. Upon arrival, he destroyed his ships and all his men's ships. Why would he do such a thing? Well, the answer is quite clear. It sent a message to his 600 men that there is no turning back. You must conquer. You must conquer this new world, conquer the people who reside here. There is no turning back. We're not going back. You have to win or else perish. If you understand this story, you know why the US just blew up the Nord Stream pipelines, which were Europe's lifeline. Okay? So it's quite clear to me what's going on right now. Nord Stream 2 and Nord Stream 1 were like the main lifelines to Europe that they could potentially seek out if they negotiated with Russia, if they dropped the sanctions, if they ended the proxy war, if they begged and pleaded to Russia to reestablish gas flow in the pipelines. Okay? I've said this, I don't know how many times on how many streams that I've come out and said, if they course correct via doing these things, they could get gas through Nord Stream 1. They could get gas through Nord Stream 2. Maybe not the Ukrainian pipelines because Ukraine is in control of those, but they could get gas through these pipelines. And they would actually, they would be able to avert crisis. We'll say that. Like catastrophic crisis. Civilization collapse would be averted. But you can't do that if the pipelines are exploded. If there's a terror attack on the pipelines, that's going to cause months, if not years of repair, if they even try to repair them. You can't go down that path for negotiations. There's no hope of negotiating with Putin to get to the Nord Stream 1 and 2 back operating so you can continue that lifeline to your country. All right? Over the past several weeks, we have seen countless protests all across Europe, and particularly in Germany, in the belly of the beast, that were saying this: reopen the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Prior to this terror attack, the only thing preventing flow through the pipeline was a regulatory block placed in February by German Chancellor Scholz at the behest of the United States. Earlier today, protests demanding the pipeline be open erupted in Germany. The timing is simply incredible here. Okay, so yes, the timing is simply incredible. More and more and more protests were taking place all across Germany. Reopen Nord Stream 2, Nord Stream 2, Nord Stream 2. They were chanting it in the streets. All right, Olaf Scholz and Ursula von der Leyen literally had to wake up and have their morning mimosa while hearing a bunch of peasants complain about reopening Nord Stream 2. That's not what they want. That's not how they want to live their lives. That's not how they want to govern their country. All right? So, let's begin to break it down. I'll first start off with Germany. Is it advantageous for Germany to have this entire system implode? Yes, it is. This entire infrastructure to implode? Yes, it is beneficial for them to have this happen. Now, am I saying they knew about this? Am I saying that they were forewarned about this? Well, we'll look at that in a second, because the answer is yes. But even hypothetically, if they weren't warned about this, would this still be a welcome surprise in Germany? Yes, it would be a welcome surprise in Germany. The reason why is quite simple. They can continue on this war and this crisis with the sanctions and the energy crisis, and they do not have to face any scrutiny from their own people for not opening Nord Stream 2 and Nord Stream 1 when they could. Okay? They can just say, geez, the thing fucking exploded. I don't know who did it, but it exploded. Shucks. All right, so we do know that they were warned about this, though, so let's begin to break this down. First of all, I say we go to the big guy and see what he has to say about the situation. Shall we? Mimi posted this on Twitter. Biden admits U.S. behind sabotage of Nord Stream 1. So this was before the war in Ukraine started. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Let me answer the first question first. If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly, since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control?
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it. Let me answer this.
I promise you we'll be able to do it, with a big grin on his face. How are you going to be able to do that if, Germany is a sovereign country and you guys don't control them? And you guys aren't like, the global police force. You can't just go around committing to the shutdown of sovereign countries' energy supplies, can you? We have ways. We have ways to make this happen. Okay, we'll take him at his word. We have ways to do it. If Russia invades Ukraine with the tanks again, then the Nord Stream 2 pipeline will cease to exist. Well, we also know that Germany was warned about this by the United States. Germany's Der Spiegel reports that the CIA warned the German government of an impending attack on the Nord Stream pipeline. Okay, so CIA warns German government against attack on Baltic Sea pipelines. You don't say! How could the CIA have known about this just like a day ago? They're geniuses. They can see into the future. This is incredible. Oh my goodness. This is truly something. Let's take a look at this. Okay. What the fuck is this? Okay, accept and continue. There are increasing signs of a planned attack on the 2 Nord Stream gas pipelines. According to Spiegel information, there are already indications of this from the USA in advance. All right, so the USA was warning Germany about this. I don't know how they could have known about this. How could they have known about? I don't know how they could have known about this, but somehow they knew about this. Well, maybe we should take a look at what your other European officials are saying about this, because there is a current member of parliament representing Poland right now. He was also a high rate. I think was he a PM in Poland for a period of time. He was the Minister of National Defense in Poland. He was the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Poland, and now he's a member of the European Parliament representing Poland. And he is none other than Radek Sikorski. Let's see what Radek Sikorski had to say. He's verified on Twitter. This, by my estimates, is kind of like the tweet heard round the world. He posted this and said, okay, so this is the photo of the Nord Stream pipeline blowing up, exploding, underwater explosion. And he said, "Thank you, USA." Now, what could Radek Sikorski mean, the member of parliament representing Poland, a deeply Russophobic country? What could he mean when he says, "Thank you, USA," and posts a picture of the Nord Stream pipeline exploding? Anyone know what he might be implying here? Any guesses in the chat as to what Radek might be implying by posting this? What he might be thanking the United States government for? Any guesses? My guess, upon seeing this, is that he hates Russia, and he thinks that this is going to result in Russia being negatively impacted or something. Now, the problem with Radek's tweet here, with Mr. Sikorski's tweet, is he is saying the quiet part out loud. What I can guarantee you is after this tweet, Mr. Sikorski will not be invited to this year's Christmas parties. No. The Atlantic Council Christmas parties will not be sending an invitation to Mr. Sikorski. He unfortunately said the quiet part out loud. He did not read the memo to the private email on his secret server, which said, confidential, don't fucking tweet about this to the world. Okay, he then went on to double down. By the way, there's no shortage of pipeline capacity for taking gas from Russia to Western Europe, including Germany. Nord Stream's only logic was for Putin to be able to blackmail or wage war on Eastern Europe with impunity. So he, rather than coming out and saying like, oh no, okay, I didn't mean it was the USA, rather than deleting the tweet, rather than doing anything like that, he says, well, yeah, like, but Russia was using this against Europe. So obviously, like, we should be thanking the United States. You don't get it. You don't get it, do you? The whole problem that people have with this tweet, Mr. Sikorsky, is that you are admitting that the United States just, in essence, violated Article 5 of the NATO treaty, but it wasn't Russia who did it. It was the United States who did it, which kind of puts all of the rest of NATO members in a precarious position. Are they going to invade Washington? Are they going to invade? Is Germany going to send tanks on Ohio next? What are they going to do here? This puts them in a pickle, I'm sure. Is Poland going to send their air artillery into Manhattan? What's going on here? I don't know. Okay, well, I replied to this tweet. I said what? Thank you, USA, for what? Thank you for, I don't know, declaring war on the people of Europe, because that's effectively what they did by exploding these pipelines. I should also mention Radek was this is real. You can look at his Wikipedia. It's right here. Radek was listed among the top 100 global thinkers in 2012 by the magazine Foreign Policy for, quote, speaking the truth even when it is not diplomatic. AKA saying the quiet part out loud. That's a real thing he won an award for from Foreign Policy magazine. Max Blumenthal wrote this: the Polish husband of neocon Biden administration Hillary Clinton confidant Ann Applebaum celebrates the attack on the Nord Stream as an act of U.S. state terror that will doom millions of Europeans to a freezing winter. And yes, Ann Applebaum is the notorious staff writer from The Atlantic. Yes. That is who it is, if you were wondering. That is the same Ann Applebaum. Zero Hedge tweeted this out. Swedish Uppsala University seismologists regarding the Nord Stream pipeline. We are very certain that these were explosions. This was not an earthquake, not a landslide. It was not Nemo biting at the edges of the Nord Stream pipeline and chipping away at the steel that built this magnificent pipeline. No. Assessment is that the second bigger explosion corresponded to more than 100 kilos of dynamite. Now, this is crazy. Who'd have 100 kilos of dynamite? I don't know. Just so happens that underwater naval demolitions. Who has an underwater naval demolitions team? Who has that? Anyone want to take a wild guess at who has that? Well, let's break it down. So, AZ Military One on Twitter shared this incredible information with the world. An expeditionary detachment of U.S. Navy ships led by the Universal Amphibious Assault Ship, the USS Kearsarge, days ago was in the Baltic Sea. What could they have been doing in the Baltic Sea? Said Ursula von der Leyen and Olaf Scholz. And they were warning the Spiegel about the attack on Nord Stream 1 and 2. What was they doing in the Baltic Sea? Surely not violating Article 5 of the NATO treaty. So, the USS Kearsarge was not only in the Baltic Sea, it was about 30 kilometers from the site of the alleged sabotage on the Nord Stream 1 gas pipeline, and only 50 kilometers from the threads of Nord Stream 2 gas pipelines. Oh my goodness. Well, I'll be damned. On September 2nd, interesting maneuvers performed by an American helicopter with the call sign FFAB-123. Then it was assumed that this board was from the USS Kearsarge Air Wing, and today more details were looked. Okay, so what does this show us? Well, it shows us that there was some suspicious activity by the United States going on in this region of the Baltic Sea where the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines just fucking exploded. We should also remember that, yes, the U.S. 6th Fleet undersea explosive specialists were actually scoping out this situation back in June. Experimentation was conducted off the coast of Bornholm, Denmark. Excuse me? Baltops 22, a perfect opportunity for research and wresting new technology. Experimentation was conducted off the coast of Bornholm, Denmark, with participants from Naval Information Warfare Center, Pacific Naval Undersea Warfare Center, Newport, and Mine Warfare Readiness and Effectiveness Measuring, all under the direction of the U.S. 6th Fleet Task Force 68. Okay. U.S. Navy 6th Fleet partnered with the U.S. Navy Research and Warfare Centers to bring the latest advancements in unmanned underwater vehicle mine hunting technology to the Baltic Sea to demonstrate the vehicle's effectiveness in operational scenarios. And there you go. So, if it wasn't clear already, who's responsible for this, let's dive a little bit deeper into why this is happening, okay? I want to bring in this tweet thread from Philip Pilkington explains the deindustrialization motives of the United States in moving forward with actions such as this. Now that the Nord Stream pipelines are gone, it's worth thinking about how a deindustrialization of Europe via permanently high energy prices. European manufacturing will no longer be economically viable. Energy inputs, one of the key inputs in manufacturing, of course, will be too expensive to viably produce products. They will simply be cheaper to buy elsewhere. There's a good chance some of this manufacturing will move to America, but only in the very short term. Why? Because investment in manufacturing creates demand for manufactured products. Manufacturing creates jobs in Europe. The workers buy the products. With no manufacturing jobs, Europeans will have far less purchasing power. If some of the manufacturing moves to America, it will be short-lived. America will realize that much of its export market has collapsed. Note that the EU makes up around 10% of U.S. exports. Then there are the imports to the U.S. U.S. continues to buy some, but they will be massively more expensive due to higher input costs. U.S. will try to poach some of this manufacturing and onshore it, but there are numerous constraints here: skilled work, infrastructure, etc. Yes, I'm sure the Uber drivers of America will pick up the industrial-based jobs of Europe. Crushing European manufacturing simply creates a black hole in Europe. This black hole sucks in everything around it as economic activity around its borders dries up. Europe will also have to respond by shutting out exports to try to revive its uncompetitive industry. Basically, the only strategy for Europe will be to shut itself off and force its higher-priced products on its residents. This will likely be accompanied by accelerated energy investment policies. This will result in yet more economic chaos for the West. All of this is basically a repeat of what happened in the 1920s. It resulted in the Great Depression. But this time, only the West will sink into depression. The new BRICS Plus bloc is building a separate economic bloc and will continue to grow while the West wither on the vine. The European energy war will likely go down in history together with the Treaty of Versailles, and the trade wars of the 1930s is one of the biggest economic policy errors in history. And lastly, another thing, when Trump was elected on a platform of milder protectionism, many people rightly pointed to the 1920s and 1930s and warned against these policies. The same people appear to have supported these much more 1920s, 30s-like policies this past year. Ironic. So, yeah, that's what's happening right now. And I don't know. It's like, how could anyone argue with all of that I just put forward? How could anyone, any reasonable, rational, non-NAFO troll argue with the information that we just looked at? It is undeniable that the U.S. played somewhat of a massive role, had significant intelligence that this was happening, and looked as though they were preparing for underwater explosions in the Baltic Sea region just miles away, leading up from September 1st onward. I mean, come on. How stupid do they really think we are? It's pretty clear to me that the U.S. is responsible for this. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the live chats as well as in the comment section. I'd be curious to hear. But let me just be quite honest with all of you. This is the biggest story that we have seen since the war in Ukraine started. This 100,000% changes everything now that we have been witnessing in this war in Ukraine. And it all but guarantees the collapse of Europe. Europe will no longer have energy this winter. I 1000% guarantee it. There is no mistaking what the U.S. is trying to do right now. They're pushing a Malthusian agenda of depopulation, degrowth, deindustrialization, and they are being they're proving to be quite successful in doing so. Europe is going to collapse. The Associated Press reported just several weeks ago, before Nord Stream 1 was at 20% gas capacity flow. At that point in time, they said, Associated Press said, if there are no further reductions in gas flow in the Nord Stream 1 pipeline or the Ukrainian pipelines or the other various pipelines that flow into Europe from Russia, what this means is that, and also, if all of the EU member states that have agreed to the 15% reduction in gas flow actually move forward with this and pursue this effectively, Europe will not have gas starting in March. Since then, we've seen the Nord Stream 1 go to 0% gas flow capacity. We've seen the Nord Stream 1 blow up, the Nord Stream 2 blow up, and we also know that EU member states are saying they will not move forward with this 15% electricity consumption reduction. They are saying they're not doing this. We know that they're not going to be able to do this. We know that what is about to happen in the EU is the complete collapse of the economic bloc. In the most poetic fashion imaginable, they have sanctioned themselves and performed these incredibly dangerous acts into creating, and they've spiraled themselves into an economic crisis and collapse, the likes of which I don't know if we will ever see again in history. That's how big I think this is going to be. And what just took place today confirms that there is no recourse. There is no course correction that Europe can take in moving forward. There's nothing that they can do to stop what is happening. There's nothing that they can change to alter the path that they are headed down. Okay? Last thing I'll say about this is that the leaders of Europe are happy. Why, Jackson, are the leaders of Europe happy? The leaders of Europe are happy because now, when the ringing is in their ears, when Olaf Scholz's ears are ringing because of the cries of the German people, okay, the demands in the streets are being screamed into, into the highest heavens, all across Europe, not just in Germany, all across Europe, okay, they will feel as though there is nothing that they can do to further avert the crisis that they have already set their countries headed down. The people of Germany, the people of all these countries, will not be able to look at their politicians in the face any longer and say, please reopen Nord Stream 2. There were massive protests yesterday in Germany demanding Nord Stream 2 be open. They will not be able to make these demands any longer because the pipelines fucking exploded, and it will take months, if not years, to repair them if they even try to do that. This was an act of terror. It was an act of sabotage. It was committed by the United States. We know the CIA knew about this, okay? And I don't even know what to say. I don't know where this goes from here. All I know is this changes everything. Thanks for watching that episode of The Dive. If you enjoyed what you saw, be sure to drop a like, subscribe, comment below, and be sure to share this video with your friends. Also, my YouTube channel has now been permanently demonetized by YouTube because of the truth that we tell here. For that reason, I'm asking you to join as a supporter on my Locals community, which you can find linked below in the description of this video or in the comment section. When you join as a donor on Locals, you get access to my weekly private live streams, all of my private content, and the opportunity to ask questions to the guests that I bring here on our show, such as Glenn Greenwald, Colonel Douglas McGregor, and Ron Paul. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. I'll see you back here next time.